Sudden pain hit me, like a sharp blade stabbing straight into the back of my eyes, spreading rapidly and intensifying. Damn, it hurt so much. My vision started to blur, my eyes aching, but I still sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen, unable to focus. God, I was so thirsty, my mouth was so dry. Some parts of my body seemed paralyzed, but I couldn't tell which ones. Was it my face or my hand? I wasn't sure. I reached for the beer, but I missed and spilled it. Everything became meaningless, but then everything suddenly made perfect sense. I could feel my brain functions slipping away, one by one. I was as sure of it as I was of my own name, Jason Black. Life is often cruel, serving us terrible dishes. And that cruelty always tricks us into taking a bite every time. Sometimes you get lucky and only have to taste a small piece, but other times you eat the whole damn dish and then spend years trying to vomit it out. At that moment, I realized that I had just swallowed an entire special sandwich mixed with the foulest things. In an instant, there was a sharp, intense, searing pain like a white-hot blade slicing through. I lunged forward, my body tearing apart, and then fell into quiet darkness. There's nothing special about me. I'm slightly above average in looks and intelligence, and slightly below average in patience and social skills. I've never been a Navy SEAL or held a black belt in any martial art. My quick temper and above average intelligence but below genius level got me into fistfights as a kid. I was smart enough not to put up with nonsense, but not smart enough to walk away from it. I've never been on the honor roll, never started my own company, never won the lottery, never worked for the mafia, or opened a secret bank account in the Caymans. I've never stood out, never. I married a woman who, like me, wasn't anything special. Katie is attractive, smart, and mostly caring. She's not a walking wet dream, not overtly flirtatious, and not a fallen woman. She was attractive enough to me in all the ways I deemed important. We met, got married, and had a son. We had our share of ups and downs, but mostly the scales balanced. We worked and saved, argued and forgave, raised our son. We experienced equilibrium and chaos, as only a long-devoted couple can understand. Sometimes we argued for valid reasons, and sometimes because one of us was foolish, selfish, or just stubborn. We argued and found resolutions, or often just agreed to disagree, to argue again another day. I smoke and drink too much, and Katie is a bit egocentric and passive-aggressive. Katie claims her passive aggression is due to my smoking and drinking, while I argue that I drink and smoke because she's so damn passive-aggressive. Round and round, again and again, but somehow it all worked. Somehow we got along, loved each other, and focused on our son, our relationship, and each other. We were happy. Neither of us was into sports regularly, but we were always active and fairly fit. We always tried to eat right, but never deprived ourselves of pizza, worrying about saturated fats. Everything in moderation. No one ever planned to write a love story about us. We were in love with each other, but not obsessed with each other. There was never any fire in our bedroom. We did what we liked, as often as we liked to do it. No more and no less. At the beginning of our marriage, we probably had sex 2 to 3 times a week, but we never had marathon sessions. As soon as we both finished, that was it until next time. Neither of us had much experience before we met, but neither of us was a virgin. She had a few more sexual partners than I did, but it never bothered me. I never had trouble attracting women, but I was selective about who I shared a bed with. Odd for a young man, I know, but that's how I am. I had to be interested in her to sleep with her, so my number not being higher was a choice, not circumstance. Like I said, Katie wasn't promiscuous, so her slightly higher number didn't matter. We were a good match, enjoyed each other, and neither of us felt shortchanged. Katie had a very difficult pregnancy and delivery with our son John, and afterwards she was left with a lot of scar tissue. John was born weighing just over 4.5 kilograms, which was quite a lot for Katie at her height of 160 centimeters. After that, sex brought some pain, but we managed. After 28 years of marriage, we still made love, but not more than 2 to 3 times a month. Katie was just as much of an initiator of sex as I was, and we rarely turned each other down when approached. So I'm confident we had as much sex as each of us wanted. We were always affectionate with each other, and it never faded. We still often held hands in public or cuddled while watching a movie. We had a lot in common and a lot of differences. We shared the same values and goals, enjoyed the same music, and although we both liked to read, we never read the same books. Katie hated TV. She rarely had the patience to sit through an entire movie, and we often struggled to find something we both liked. She enjoyed cooking, and although I hated cooking, I didn't mind cleaning up. We both loved outdoor relaxation and hiking, but while Katie enjoyed birdwatching, I preferred fishing or hiking. We were similar where it mattered, and our differences allowed us to express our individuality. It worked. Becoming parents, we both changed for the better. When our son was born, I gained patience and worked on developing social skills. While Katie became slightly less egocentric and tried to be less passive-aggressive when it came to our son, I joined the Scouts with John, and Katie joined the parent committee. We all attended church together and made sure John was always active, happy, and loved. Katie advocated for discipline, and I provided balanced guidance. We taught John hard work and honesty, compassion and loyalty, hope and self-belief, and faith in himself and God, and we were proud of the results. We weren't perfect, but it seemed like we functioned together perfectly. "Mr. Black, can you hear me?" The voice pulled me back to reality, but my mind was still foggy. I slowly scanned the room, trying to locate the voice. My lips were dry, my tongue heavy and unresponsive. Where am I? What the hell is going on? My unfocused gaze landed on a figure to my right. "Mr. Black, my name is Dr. Taylor. Do you know where you are?" I could only mumble, my voice swallowed by exhaustion and pain. There was a brief pause. "Mr. Black, you've had a stroke, a hemorrhagic stroke. You're at Presbyterian Hospital. Do you understand?" I nodded weakly, although my mouth couldn't form clear words. "All right, don't worry about your speech, Mr. Black. It appears that as a result of the stroke, you're suffering from aphasia. The right side of your face is damaged, with slight drooping. At this moment, we can't determine if you have other injuries or if the aphasia is due to brain damage or facial muscle damage. Once you're a bit stronger, we can assess the extent and nature of your impairments, provide a more complete diagnosis, and give you a prognosis." The doctor spent a few more minutes explaining the surgery I had undergone to isolate and stop the bleeding in my brain, which he believed was the cause of my stroke. I tried to focus my gaze on him, tried to make sense of what he was telling me. I tried, but I just drifted into a dreamless sleep. A few days later, I woke up to find my son John sitting beside me in the hospital room. I still couldn't focus my gaze enough to see him clearly, but I knew it was John. Fathers just know. Noticing that I was looking at him, John took my hand, sniffed, and tried to squeeze out a few words. "Dad," his voice sounded tired, defeated. I simply nodded, squeezed his hand, and looked away. What could be said? The only people I had seen were my boss, 2 colleagues, and hospital staff. 3 days later, John and I found ourselves in a tense standoff, staring each other down for a few minutes. I was unhappy that he was here, and he was unhappy about many things. "Dad, you're going home tomorrow. How the hell are you going to manage alone?" "No doubt, I'll be there to help you. You can't drive, you can barely walk. What's your plan?" He waited for my decision. "John, I love you. I appreciate you and your care, but you've just started a new job and shouldn't take time off to help me. I'll be fine." Of course, it didn't sound like that at all. I had made progress in my speech recovery, but it was still slow, difficult, heavily slurred, and often barely surpassed mumbling. John was one of the few, aside from hospital staff, who could understand the meaning behind my slurred speech. "This is not up for discussion, Dad, because Mom," he let that thought hang on his tongue. "You can't be alone. At least, not for long. Who the hell else will help you? My boss was understanding about it, so stop worrying. I can stay with you, work at the office for a few hours less when I need to accompany you, and earn the rest of the time by working remotely from home. Everything will be fine." The prognosis was good. Besides aphasia, I had partial paralysis of my right arm and leg. With a bit of physiotherapy and speech therapy, blood-thinning medications, and lifestyle changes, I would be able to regain most of the functions in my leg and arm and significantly reduce the drooping of my face. Dr. Taylor believed I would limp slightly, and the drooping of the face would be barely noticeable. Fortunately for me, it seemed that aphasia was directly related to the muscle damage in my face and mouth. "All right, John, thank you," I mumbled, sniffing. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, John. There were no warning signs. I didn't know I was about to lose my wife, and she didn't give me any hints. We had been married for just over 25 years when it happened. Katie was the director of a nonprofit organization, and I was the sales director in North America in a division of a large international software company. I know, what's a guy with poor social skills doing in the sales department? The truth is, the worst salespeople are the ones with the gift of gab. They just can't listen. If you want to sell a complex software solution to a Fortune 500 company, you need to know how to listen. The leaders of these large companies don't want to be your friends, but they must trust and respect you on a professional level. They may want to have a beer or play a round of golf with chatterboxes, but they prefer to work on their business issues with listeners. I was making excellent money, and although I was good at my job, I've always been a great salesman. I was never outstanding, never one of the few guys making seven-figure commissions, but I always met or exceeded quota, regardless of the economy, and my consistent performance earned me my current position and the respect of many colleagues past and present. I wasn't overly critical of my team, but I expected most of the time that you would meet quota. I worked with my reps to help them achieve this, and over the years, I managed salespeople. I had to fire only a few people for performance issues. I would say, and often said, that these were hiring mistakes, which often happen in times of economic growth when you have to soften your standards a bit to fill open positions. I always opposed such hiring, but upper management often pushed me toward it. Now reps can generate a lot of new business while supporting existing clients. Let's face it, some guys are great hunters, while others excel at farming. The management solved this problem by dividing territories. I always considered this short-sighted and lazy. I wanted to separate these two directions. Let the hunters hunt and the farmers take care of the farm. For many years, I was told that this was unfeasible, unprofitable, and impractical. But everything changed when we switched to the SaaS, software as a service delivery model. Our licensing shifted to subscription, and suddenly farming became hugely significant. I finally could unleash my hunters and put farmers on fertile pasture. At first, some hunters didn't like the idea of giving up low-hanging fruit in the form of subscription renewals, but ultimately, they realized they enjoyed their work more and with properly adjusted quotas, still pulled in $250,000 according to plan. In the end, everyone became happier. I spend most of my time solving other people's problems, and I enjoy it. I like solving problems for my representatives, our clients, and my company. I could almost always find a mutually acceptable solution, which made my work enjoyable. However, there was a lot of stress. You still need to meet your targets. In sales, you can't rest on your laurels. You're only as good as the last quarter, which means you're constantly on the move. I traveled a lot. Every week, I was somewhere on the road, sometimes overnight, sometimes for a whole week. It's exhausting. It takes a toll on personal relationships, physical, and mental health. Hobbies helped me cope with stress, and Katie fully supported my career, which also helped reduce the stress I could have experienced worrying about my home life. I damn well tried to be available for her and John every weekend, and mostly, I succeeded. I held sales meetings, conference calls, midweek, which was a bit unusual, but I wanted the beginning of the week to be free so we could react to everything that happened over the weekend. And so my representatives had at least some time to act on any proposals or corporate directives we discussed during the sales meeting. It worked out. Sitting in my office and going through mail on a Wednesday afternoon, right after the weekly sales meeting, I picked up a plain white envelope with a Dallas postmark and no return address. It was as unremarkable as everything else, but opening that envelope changed my life, steering it down a new, dangerous path from which I would never fully recover. Oh, Katie, Peter Sellers was a happy little guy, despite his profession. Fairly average in appearance and size, which I suppose was an advantage professionally. Our first meeting was brief and didn't inspire much confidence. He asked a lot of questions, which I expected, but also asked a lot of questions that seemed damn inappropriate to me. Some of his comments were downright strange, and he was annoyingly cheerful about everything. Nevertheless, he came highly recommended, and if I'm honest, I knew squat about this kind of work. I answered his questions, asked a few in return, provided him with some information he wanted, filled out a few forms, paid him, and that was it. Give me 2 weeks, Mr. Black. Let's agree to meet in 2 weeks or sooner if we can get everything wrapped up by then. Try to get some rest. You look deadly tired and ready to drop. I agreed, muttered something about tiredness and someone dropping dead, and left. During our second meeting, which took place just under 2 weeks later, Peter Sellers didn't seem as happy and quirky to me. God, what a week it's been. We were so busy at the office that I hardly had time to think. Today I finished my last project and was looking forward to a hot bath, delicious food, and a quiet evening with my husband Jason. Lately, we've both been working a bit more than usual. Our schedules have been off, and we haven't really talked properly for about 2 weeks now. Usually, I don't have to spend as much time as I have lately, and I can work according to Jason's crazy schedule. But this project had tight deadlines, and Jason seemed even busier than usual. He told me about delivering something that meant restructuring something that seemed important. Oh, and a new business model, I don't know what, requiring a new metric of success or something like that. Mostly, my eyes glazed over a bit as Jason talked about his work. I don't understand technology. It all sounds like the parents in Charlie Brown to me. Why? But damn it, it made him happy, and I loved him, so I tried to listen and understand. I love my husband. I enjoy supporting him and being supported by him. I love our life together and our plans for the future. Jason provided us with an excellent standard of living that would allow us to consider early retirement. We hoped that in a few years' time, we would have the opportunity to enjoy life. When our son John became independent and our house was paid off, we saved a lot of money. We often just sat with a glass of wine, and for Jason, whiskey, and planned our near future. It was all so exciting and attainable that I couldn't help but support Jason, who was working for it to happen. God, I loved my man. I wanted him to quit smoking and drink less. Combined with the stress he was constantly under, I worried about his health and our future. He always joked that he would quit smoking when I learned to face a problem head-on. I had a habit of avoiding conflicts, and I dealt with my anger by behaving passively with Jason. I used sarcasm, for example, saying, "just kidding," after scolding him, or expressing my anger covertly, not sharing it with him, denying sex quietly, or taking pleasure in his mistakes if I was right about something. I told you so. Jason hates it. He solves problems and takes action immediately as soon as they arise. He never postpones what needs a solution and doesn't shy away from conflicts. On the contrary, he welcomes them as a means of resolution. He says what's on his mind and hopes for the same from me. Of course, he doesn't understand that, but that's a woman's prerogative. I knew that Jason would be home this evening. I wasn't sure exactly when, as he often worked late, but he didn't mention any trips, so I was confident that we would be able to enjoy a pleasant evening together. On the way home, I stopped by the store for dinner groceries and hummed to myself for the last couple of miles. As I pulled up to the house, I was surprised to see Jason's car in the driveway. I tried to remember the last time he beat me home, but couldn't. Well, more time to relax together and mend our relationship. I parked next to Jason, gathered the groceries, and headed towards the front door. Entering the foyer, I called out for Jason, but was met with silence. Strange, I thought, placing the grocery bags on the kitchen island and calling his name again, but still, there was no response. I walked towards our bedroom, thinking he might be in the shower. His jacket was lying on the bed, but Jason wasn't there. Walking down the hallway to his home office, I opened the door, and at that moment, my whole world came crashing down. Speech therapy and physiotherapy were hugely beneficial. It had only been 3 months since the stroke, and I could already walk and talk. Of course, I sounded like that NPR lady, a blogger on the radio, but I could articulate, albeit with difficulty. John was a constant source of strength and support, helping me push the boundaries of my physical capabilities. However, he was discontent, and I knew it was finally time for us to talk about it. It was time for me to be there for my son, to help him deal with this. "John, have you spoken to your mother recently?" There was a long pause. I admired his intellect, and I never rushed him for answers, knowing they were well thought out. He wouldn't speak until he knew what and how he wanted to say it. It always drove Katie a bit crazy, but I saw it as a strength of character to be admired and encouraged. No, Dad, I haven't spoken to her. She emailed me, but I didn't reply. I don't know if I can. I mean, I want to know what happened, but I'm not sure if I can forgive her, so. She's your mother, John. She loves you. Maybe by talking to her, you can find a way to keep her in your life in a way that you can come to terms with. Or maybe not, but if you avoid it, you'll only be left with anger and doubt. And this is a kettle calling the pot black. Goodness, Dad, what if I said that to you? John, she married me. She gave birth to you. Those are completely different things. Besides, I'm not avoiding her. She knows where I live. For your own sake, try to resolve these issues with her. Let her know how she hurt you, so at least you can feel a bit better. If you keep it bottled up inside, it'll only hurt you more. I don't know, Dad. All right, John, let's talk about it over lunch. Tell me what's on your mind. Ask questions, throw tantrums. Let's kick that damn elephant out of the room. I left him for a while and stepped out of the room to prepare lunch for us. As I mentioned earlier, I hated cooking, so the food in those days was always quite simple, but my new diet required a bit of effort. I made a good salad and sliced a few apples and pears for garnish, along with some grapes and nuts. After a while, John walked into the kitchen and sat across from me, suspiciously eyeing his salad. After a few moments of careful examination of his plate, he picked up a slice of pear and took a bite. I'm proud of you, Dad. You're really sticking to this diet. Another pause and another slow bite of pear, and then barely audible whisper. What happened, Dad? I sighed. This will be difficult, but it had to happen. Well, I was in my home office when I had a stroke. Fortunately, your mom found me unconscious shortly after it happened and called 911. I fell silent, looking out at the backyard. I know, Dad, but she left even before the ambulance arrived. She didn't go to the hospital. She didn't come back home, Dad. For heaven's sake, her husband just had a stroke, and she abandoned him. When you needed her the most, she left you, Dad. What kind of person does that? John, she did the right thing at that moment. She was the last person I needed then or need now. She never handled conflicts well, so her reaction doesn't surprise me. Damn it, Dad, you had a stroke and needed medical help. That's hardly a crisis to run away from. Conflict, John, not a crisis. Your mom couldn't handle the looming conflict. When she found me at the table, unconscious and lying in my own vomit, she realized that the biggest conflict in our life had just cut my knees from under me and headed towards her. She couldn't come to terms with that. She couldn't come to terms with what she had done. It nearly killed me, and she couldn't come to terms with it. Come to terms with what, Dad? What did she do that could be worse than just leaving you like that? Looking into his serious, pleading face, I sighed deeply, and then I told him. I opened the door to Jason's home office and stared in disbelief at the scene before me. Oh, Jason had collapsed on the desk and lay unconscious in a pool of vomit. I rushed to him and noticed that, thankfully, he was still breathing, though it seemed slightly labored. Now I was sobbing uncontrollably, shouting for him to wake up. Jason, I shook him, but he refused to wake up. I adjusted his head so that he wouldn't lie in his own vomit, all the while sobbing and shouting, starting to hyperventilate. Jason, I kept shaking him. Damn it. I knew that stress, his smoking, and drinking would be his downfall. I was so angry with him. Damn you, Jason. Wake up. I hit his shoulder, screaming and crying. I hugged him. Jason, please. Then I looked up at his laptop and froze. No, this can't be. Jason, my support, the man I love. He's watching a video of me, like an animal, mating in a cheap motel room with my colleague, Chris Peters. With him, I did that. My head was spinning, loud buzzing in my ears. I stood there, frozen, watching and listening to my betrayal. My selfish, foolish betrayal. Betrayal that nearly killed my husband. I don't know exactly how long I stood there, but I know that what I did next is what I'm most ashamed of. Instead of dialing 911 and getting help from my husband, who might have been dying, I removed the DVD from his laptop and searched his office for further evidence. I found Mr. Sellers' investigator's report, and taking both the report and DVD from the room, hurried down the hallway. I rushed into our bedroom and hastily packed a suitcase, throwing the DVD and detective's report into it. Carrying the suitcase downstairs and placing it in the trunk of my car, I went to the kitchen, grabbed the grocery bags, and put them in the car. I can't explain why. Returning to the house, I poured myself a drink to calm my nerves. Only after finishing the drink did I finally dial 911 to request help from my husband. "Who does that?" I gave my name and address, answered a few questions about his condition, then hung up, rushed to the car, leaving the front door open, and drove away. I couldn't live with it. When I returned home from the hospital after the stroke, it became clear that Katie had been in the house and taken her things. It seemed she had spent a lot of time going through everything. She took photos, DVDs, CDs, art pieces, kitchenware, her culinary books, etc. Even the furniture was gone. It was evident that she had moved out. John took it hard. I didn't care. John wanted to break her neck. I wanted to lie down. Over the next few months, as I endured the torment and humiliation of physical and speech therapy, I pondered what brought me here. I heard nothing about Katie. John and I never talked about her, and I didn't know if he kept in touch with her or not. I hoped for his sake, but overall, I didn't care. I discovered that contrary to what people say, you can absolutely just stop loving someone immediately. More accurately, I unconditionally and immediately realized that I didn't love the woman I'm currently married to. I still loved the woman I married 25 years ago, but she left, and in her place, someone I didn't know appeared. I didn't feel hatred towards her. How could I? I didn't even know her. No, I was simply and completely indifferent to her. She was just John's mother. I was glad she didn't stay in the house, that her inability to handle conflicts or the consequences of her actions made her run away. Otherwise, it would have been difficult. Who wants to interact with a complete stranger while they're recovering from a serious illness? Certainly not me. No, it was I hadn't decided yet when I would deal with my marriage. When Mr. Sellers first contacted me and informed me that she was indeed cheating on me, I took appropriate steps, confident in the correctness of my actions and the need to act promptly. I had already contacted a lawyer who instructed me on the necessary and permissible actions before filing a lawsuit, and I started this process. I asked Mr. Sellers to send copies of his report, DVD, etc. to my lawyer, began separating our finances as much as possible, and started removing Katie from being my beneficiary in everything I could think of. I mean, who consciously decides to marry someone who, as they know, will cheat on them? So why stay married to the same person? The only thing I knew about this Katie was that she was a cheater and a coward. Oh, and John's mother. Otherwise, she was a complete stranger. No, I wasn't going to make the decision to grow old with a cowardly cheater. Divorce was my only way out, but at the moment, I had more important matters to attend to. I needed to recover and decide what I would do next for myself. I still had to achieve a certain level of physical progress, and I had to decide whether I would return to my stress-filled corporate life or choose a different path. I hoped to work for another 4 to 5 years and then retire. Perhaps I could afford to retire now, albeit with less comfort than I had hoped for. Maybe I could start a new career or reevaluate my position in the company to reduce stress and travel. I still didn't know. I started eating better, quit smoking and drinking, although the doctor told me that an occasional drink, a shot here and there, wouldn't hurt if and when I could wean off my current medications. I didn't miss drinking or smoking. A near-death experience will do that to you. Physical therapy was a good workout, and I was walking quite a bit now too. No, the only thing I knew for sure was that I wouldn't let Katie's infidelity change or destroy me. Instead, I decided to use her and its consequences as motivation necessary for me to become healthy and happy. 3 years have passed since that day, the day I found my husband Jason dying because of my selfish foolishness. Since then, I haven't spoken to either Jason or John. John refuses to talk to me, and I'm too ashamed to try to contact Jason. In the end, he filed for divorce and served me at work. I didn't resist the divorce, and we mostly split everything evenly, albeit slightly in Jason's favor. But what did I care about that? In the end, Jason threatened the organization I worked for with very bad publicity if they didn't take certain actions. Negotiations dragged on, and in the end, Chris Peters was fired, and the executive director, my boss, received a reprimand. My career in this organization came to a halt. During this process, it became clear that it was Chris who warned Jason about our affair. Chris and his wife had an open marriage, which over the years led them to drift apart from each other. He joked that we were work spouses. He was my work husband, and I was his work wife. I never considered this little game dangerous and didn't maintain appropriate boundaries. Soon after the start of our physical affair, my boss caught us together in my office, and we were officially reprimanded. In a subsequent letter to me, she pointed out that workplace affairs, especially between married colleagues, strongly contradict our code of ethics, and as my boss, she had to issue us a reprimand and advise us to end the affair. As my friend, she didn't understand why I wanted to cheat on Jason with Chris, but she understood the allure of the affair, and if I wanted to continue, please keep it out of the office. So we did. This should have been enough to bring me to my senses, but it didn't happen. I didn't love Chris, but I liked him. What I really liked was the sex. He wasn't better than Jason, just smaller. Yes, smaller. Since John was born, sex with Jason had been accompanied by a certain degree of pain. He's no porn star, maybe average. If I had to guess, I'd say he's 18 centimeters in length and 13 centimeters in girth. Chris, on the other hand, had a very small and thin, which meant that for the first time in many years, I could have sex without pain. And that was it for me. Chris started falling in love with me and often talked about leaving our spouses and being together. I immediately shut down that topic. I would never leave Jason. I loved him. I told Chris that although I really liked him, I didn't love him. I tried very hard not to mention that I actually liked his little, but he pressed me until I finally admitted it. He wasn't happy, not happy at all, and therefore hoped that exposing me to Jason would lead to my divorce and hurt me a bit for insulting his manhood. He sent copies of our reprimand and the letter my boss sent me to Jason by mail. This prompted Jason to hire a private detective, and here we are. Of course, after I found Jason dying and ran away, I couldn't bring myself to continue the affair with Chris. And when I found out he had revealed our relationship to Jason, I gave him a strong slap and haven't spoken to him since. I tried to mend my relationship with my son John, but he refuses to have anything to do with me. He got married about 4 months ago, and I was devastated to find out about it only after the fact. Not only did he not invite me, but he didn't even tell me about it. I know that my escape from Jason deeply hurt John. I think if it were just about infidelity, we would still communicate. It would be strained, and of course not as close as before, but we would still talk. However, escaping from Jason meant that John would not forgive me. I knew he would never get over it, and that's my biggest regret. Of course, I regret cheating on Jason, and I truly dodged a bullet when he survived. I still can't believe I waited all that time to call 911. I still have sleepless nights thinking about it. No, my inability to admit what I did and what it did to Jason put an end to my relationship with my son. Jason probably expected nothing less. He knew me well, just as well as I knew him. I knew my infidelity would end our marriage. I knew Jason couldn't tolerate it. Oh, he wouldn't have crumbled. If it had been a drunken fling for one night, he probably would have come to terms with it. It would have seriously undermined his faith and trust in me, but it wouldn't have destroyed our marriage. But a 14-month affair? No, there was no coming back from that. Jason knew it, I knew it. It was over between us, and not only did I ruin our marriage, these same actions nearly killed the man I loved. If that wasn't enough, my delay in calling 911 could have finished the job that my infidelity didn't complete. After that, I simply didn't have the opportunity to meet with Jason, but I didn't try either. I keep tabs on him, well, as much as I can. It seems like he's mostly recovered from the stroke, thank God, and quit his job. Apparently, after selling our house, he bought an RV and spends his time traveling between state and national parks, working as a sort of park ambassador in exchange for some cash and a place to stay, a spot to hook up his RV. I think he finally quit smoking and drinking. His stressful job is gone, and he's traveling the country, enjoying all the natural beauty this country has to offer. God, how I wish I could be with him. I'm happy for Jason. I miss him terribly, and I miss my son, John. I still hope that someday John and I will reunite, but I pray that Jason never has to see me again. I owe him at least that much. As the story concludes, the scars of the past may have formed, but Jason has found his own path, while Katie lives in perpetual regret, a price she pays for her betrayal and foolishness. Life has forever changed, and the shards of a once happy marriage are now only distant memories.